Hi guys, it's Beth, and today I am back with a card share from my Pink Paislee Snow Village pad that I've been working on killing these past few months. And yes, this is what's left of the pad cover. When I say I'm using up the pad, I'm using up the pad. And I'll talk about what I've been using that for a little bit later, but before Christmas, I did a card share where I showed you I made over 50 cards using the CPS 217 sketch. And it was just a bunch of variations of this card, and I had over 50, which I used most of them already for my Random Acts of Cardness Christmas card shower. So the cards I'm going to share today are the cards that I've made since then, most of which I've made after Christmas, so just carrying the season on a little bit longer. Before I begin, I would like to show you just some of the stamp sets that I used. I think I used this tiny tag sayings from Lawn Fawn for at least one of the cards, and then I'm using them for another project after this. And I have a couple recollections stamp sets that I got this season. I actually think I got this one after Christmas. And then this is an old stamp set that is Printworks. Use that on a couple. And then I also used a bunch of sentiments that I printed from my silhouette. Normally when I start my card process, the card part of my Kilopad projects, I will go through, I pull out any sentiments that I've already pre-stamped, because if I stamp a sentiment, a lot of times I'll stamp more than one just so I can have some on hand to use. And then I will also just go through and stamp a bunch of sentiments that I can use for whatever the themes I might be working on for that particular pad. So most of the sentiments I've used in this pad, I like pre-stamped or had pre-printed from my silhouette. Just, it saves time rather than each, card sketch that I do or each card that I make having to stop, pull out my stamp supplies, stamp, and then make the card. So that's why you'll see a lot of the same sentiments used throughout, but it makes it a lot quicker. So when I started on this last batch of cards, I wanted to use up the journaling cards or cut-aparts that came in the pack. And so that's what I started with these. They're all kind of a simple layout. But in this case, there was no words on the journaling card. It was just the 3 striped chevrons. And so I just used that as my main embellishment and added my sentiment on top of that, which happy, happy, happy birthday. That came from my silhouette. I printed that one out. And this was another cut apart journaling spot. It has like that pretty gold glittered embossed detail on it. And then way down here, it's got this little believe. So I just kind of left that as my sentiment on the card. And then this wreath I added, and it is from, I actually used up this whole pack, which is nice. Got to use up something from my stash, but it's Jolie's in EK Success. And it was the Noel wreaths. Get that to focus. Anyway, and so there were 2 wreaths that had like these little gems on them, and then there were some stockings that came in that pack. And a lot of the gems had shifted or fallen off somewhere. They weren't even in that little baggie. And so I cleared off a spot kind of up here at the top and moved some of the gems around to cover the glue dots that were left. And then to fill that empty spot, I had some of these layered poinsettias with a gem center in them. And they've been in my stash for a while. I didn't even have the packaging left. It was just, there were like 3 or 4 of them left on a plastic, just the plastic piece. So I just added that just because when you have a wreath, a lot of times you'll have like some smaller flowers or decorations on it, but then you have a main focal point, which is like, a bigger bow or a bigger flower. So that's what I was going for. And then down here, I just added some vinyl circle punches. Same thing on that one. And down here, I just added some tan. I actually had some tan vinyl circles cut out already that matched that gold background perfectly. And then here were the stockings that were in the same pack as those wreaths. And there were 3, so I just went ahead and added them all to this journaling card to help fill that spot. And this journal card kind of had the fishtail already cut into it with the reindeer, and then it just says Happy Holidays down here. And so again, I left that as my sentiment and just added additional embellishments. And in this case, I used some white vinyl dots down here. This is the same journal card we just saw, except for I added these poinsettias from the Paper Studio, and they have like a clear back to them. And so I left 3 of them clear and just put them right onto the journal card, kind of at an angle. And then this one, I actually put on some cardstock and then fussy cut it out and put it up on like a glue dot just to give it a little extra dimension there. And then just added some strips that matched my card mat, or my mat to my journal card on there. This was a journal card cut apart in the pack, and it had a lot of blank space. So when I started this project and had pulled out some of the embellishments that coordinated with paper, I ran across this sticker set from, it's actually Autumn Leaves, Christmas. You can see that barely. And I inherited, I think my mother-in-law passed this one on to me. And it's also like clear back stickers. And so I took one of the smaller sentiments and put it on this journal card. And then down here on my little red strip, I added some gray triangles just to try and mimic this triangle layering over here, and just to add a little something at the bottom. I had a bunch of these All is Calm, All is Bright already printed out from my silhouette. And so on these 2, I just backed them on some of the red scraps that I had of cardstock and let that be the simple card. And this card was fun. This little scene is actually from the top of my pad cover. It was like the symbol or logo or whatever for this particular pad, and so I fussy cut it out of there and then popped it up on some foam to put on this card, because this is actually 2 pattern paper strips that didn't quite cover the whole card. And so this actually goes all the way from one end to the other, and it covers up that little seam or little open space. So I thought that was like a pretty little scene. So I didn't want that to go to waste on that pad cover. And then there's one last one of these. This was another journal card, had like really pretty gold, kind of embossed and glittered effect. So I just layered it on this paper mat, which had that similar pattern or similar gold color. And this was a blank spot, and so I just stamped Season's Greetings in there, layered some red cardstock that's the same size of the 3x4 cut apart, but angled it just to give it a little bit of shadow matting. And then it needed a little bit more red in there, so I just brought in this little fishtail at the bottom here. So those went together really quickly because there wasn't a whole lot of cutting or embellishing to them. This is Card Sketch MFT WSC 330. And I had almost 2 full pieces of this gray and cream chevron stripe left. And so I knew I wanted to make it something other than Christmas. And then I also had a bunch of this turquoise dot paper left, kind of in varied widths, but I had a bunch of strips left of that. So with this sketch, I left off, I didn't put this little strip down here at the bottom. I left that off and then made this a kind of rectangular element and just included my sentiment on that. So you can see, like, I just used whatever widths I had of the turquoise paper and backed that on gray to help it pop off. So I got a bunch of those. Next, I have Operation Right Home Sketch 184. And I had a bunch of strips that weren't quite wide enough to be like a full card mat. I like to do my card mats like 1/8 of an inch smaller than my card base. And so they weren't quite wide enough to go all the way across. So I backed them with some gray cardstock and then followed this sketch, except for I made, like, my strip over here was a lot thinner, and my circle element was probably a lot smaller. And again, I just used some of the strips that I had left. I didn't necessarily, I may have cut them down this way, but I didn't worry about their width. And then matted them on gray. So I had a couple with this kind of floral, and then a couple with the snowflakes. So, but they all have that merry and bright sentiment. This is MFT WSC 395. And I finally got a stitch circle die. I actually got it as a Christmas present, so I was kind of eager to use that. So I made my circle element I used by stitch circle die. And then I kind of wanted to keep it not really monochromatic, but simple in colors. I didn't want to use a whole lot of patterns on this one. Decided to make it a little more clean. And so I did a pattern for the circle element, but then my sentiment, I just made it the same gray as my card mat and then backed that on some cream to stand out. And then added some cream cardstock circle punches down here just to give it a little bit more something. But wanted to keep the colors used kind of simple. This is Sweet Sunday 239. And I had a bunch of these that were kind of already the right size, so I just backed them with a little bit of green paper. And then I didn't have a whole lot of cream cardstock that matched the cream in this pad. Most of what I had is more of like a darker ivory or white. So you're going to see a lot of white. I mean, and there is a little bit of white in the pad too, but I just feel like sometimes the white stands out like a sore thumb. But the cream, my ivory paper didn't really look great either. So I don't think the sentiment looks bad, but I was trying to make the white tie in a little bit more by using white and this little fishtail up here. But I mean, they're still pretty. They're just, I didn't love how the white turned out on that one. And this is Operation Right Home Sketch 182, or Sketch just 82. And I actually turned mine with an horizontal orientation just to match the orientation of the glittered reindeer. And so then I moved my sentiment or my element over here, made that my sentiment with that merry and bright stamp again. And then I felt like I needed to pull in the red just to kind of balance it all out. So I stole a method from Christy Marcotte by adding a little fishtail up here just to help balance it out. Had a bunch of those too. This is Merry Monday number 58. And I got a bunch of these. And again, they were not quite wide enough to be my normal full card mat, or even like the 1/8 of an inch shy of the card base. But I could get the width. So these go from a true 5.5 inches from the top to bottom of the card base, but they just have more of a margin on either side. And then I had a bunch of different pattern paper rectangles that fit this size, and then just kind of mixed and matched patterns down here for my little fishtails, and then I have a circle sentiment on all of them. This one I changed it up to Joy to the World. So I was able to get a bunch out of that sketch as well. That always makes it go faster. This is Sweet Sunday 280. And again, I kind of kept this one simple. I didn't mat the rectangle. And then again, because I added a white sentiment down here, I pulled in some white up here with some white vinyl dots. Just one to add a little bit to the card since it was kind of a plain background as well. This is Operation Right Home Sketch 99. I feel like I used a lot of Operation Right Home sketches this time. They're good sketches to use. And this one, just use some more of that green or the triangle tree type paper. And then because I had used some gray on my sentiment to map my sentiment over here, I felt like I needed to use the green again that I used for my strip that goes across this way. And so I pulled the green in up here so that way I have 2 green pieces and then 2 of the gray. Just makes it look like a little more tied together. These cards are using Operation Right Home Sketch 56. And this was another cut apart journaling card, and it had like some white space up here that I just cut off. So I cut the journaling card down to 3 by 3 just so I could get the peace, love, and joy. And then this chevron is also part of that. And then just matted it on some gray to match the sketch. And then I pulled in the gray over here to balance it out too with some little cardstock circles. Back when I first got this pad, one of the first projects I did was I was making a Christmas banner, and I don't remember if it had like Noel or Joy. I don't remember what I actually said on it, but I had cut a bunch of rectangle pieces out of, or square pieces out of the pattern paper and kind of layered them, and then they had a little corner, like a scalloped corner on here as well. But then because I wanted it to be durable, and my letters that I had cut from my silhouette were kind of thin and intricate, I decided to use spray adhesive to, you know, make it easier to get the letters to go on my banner. Well, because spray adhesive has worked for me in the past on bigger projects, but it didn't work on the banner very well. It didn't hold up very well. So I was able to salvage like these pieces. These are all pieces from that banner that didn't have the spray adhesive on it for some reason or another. Like it was just kind of my anchor pieces at the ends of the banner. And so this one had a little poinsettia that I had already fussy cut out of this paper that I had just layered on there to give it some dimension. So I've had these sitting with my pad for several years, ever since that banner didn't turn out the way I'd hoped. So when I saw this Mojo Monday sketch number 361, I knew it was a perfect way to finally use up these pieces. So I just cut off the scalloped corners and kind of cut the green down a little bit to make them fit the card a little bit better, and then just rounded the corners of the green so that they matched the other layers, and then just added this little Merry and Bright circle. So something to keep in mind if you're making a project and it doesn't work out quite the way you'd hoped. You can always salvage, mostly you can always salvage the pieces for something else. So don't just throw it away. This is sketch, it's MFT WSC 331. And again, I just managed to find 2 strips that kind of worked the right width for this card sketch. And then of the sentiments I'd pre-stamped, I had 2 left, like 2 different Merry Christmases left that I just fishtailed and added there. And then for my circle element over here, I added a scalloped circle, and then I had some big white flowers that I had in my stash. They kind of mimicked the shape of the poinsettia here, and so I just used those and then added a red center just to try and tie it into the rest of the card. Next I have Freshly Made Sketches 83. And this was just using a bunch of like rectangle scraps that I had, and then just various strips and various sentiments that I had already had made up. Yeah, and since I had a hard time matching the cream on here, so instead of using white and ivory, a lot of times I just used gray. And this one I added some clear stickles, which didn't show up, didn't end up being as dimensional as I'd hoped, but this is MFT WSC 180. And again, using some of the sentiments that I had already stamped, a lot of times when I'm stamping, I'll stamp on, like I save these strips of my whites and creams and some of my lighter solids and use those to stamp on. So this scrap wasn't long enough to do like the scallop, or the fishtail on there rather. So I just kind of left that as a straight edge, but this one I was able to fishtail. And I felt like I needed to pull in the backgrounds, like my matte colors. So again, I just used that method where I added a little fishtail of those colors just to help tie it all together. So this one is Mojo Monday 435. And this was, I just kind of had to combine some strips on this one. I only had one of the little glittered snowflake, so I combined it with this turquoise pattern. And then I thought it kind of tied in with the sentiment, May your days be cozy. Again, I don't like the stark white on there, but the cream didn't look good either. And then this little snowflake at the bottom is one that I had stamped when I did my card batch before Christmas, and it's kind of tone on tone embossed snowflake. So I stamped some with like on white paper with white embossing powder, and then I did some on ivory paper with a clear embossing powder. And then here's one I just did with a birthday sentiment that I printed from my silhouette and used two of the same turquoise pattern. This is S&S 93 from the Sweet Shop, and I turned, again, changed the orientation to horizontal to match my patterned paper, and instead of an embellishment on here, I added a sentiment, like Happy Holidays. So I have two similar to that, and then on this one I did turn it upright. And on this one, I was trying to get, I thought the turquoise in these strips would match the turquoise in that background striped paper a little bit better, but I'm not loving how that turned out. But didn't want to necessarily pull it apart, so I just added my happy birthday sentiment and carried on. This is Paper Play Sketches 17. Again, just using up some of those rectangular pieces that I had. And instead of buttons up here, I added a little fishtail banner to tie in that gray. In my stash, I had found like this Happy Holidays sentiment that's on vellum. And so this card, it's actually made, again, there's two strips that are covering the card base that don't quite cover the whole card base. So I attached them together with this strip of green down here, and then thought this would be a good card for this Happy Holidays sentiment. So I put it on, glued it to some gray cardstock, and then just put it down across this card. And it kind of follows this Happy Inkin Thursday Bloghop August 17th sketch that I found. This is a sketch with no name. I'm not sure where that one came from. But I used one of my All is Calm, All is Bright sentiments, and then just combined the gold and the turquoise with some of those tan vinyl dots down there. Operation Right Home sketch number 90 actually allowed me to use up some of my smaller rectangles, and then I just combined them together with this Warm Holiday Wishes sentiment as my strip across the middle. And this is another sketch with no name. So one of my rectangles I just cut it into a fishtail and then added my sentiment as per the sketch, but then instead of the string at the top, I just added like a knotted ribbon. And the ribbon actually matches the off-white or the cream in the paper pretty well. And total side note, but every time I saw this paper, especially when you saw a whole sheet of it, it just made me think of the video game Q*bert from when I was younger. Just all the cubes that he used to hop on. Anyway, this is SC581. And again, just used up some of those strips. Another Operation Right Home sketch, number 32. Kind of a simple one. This was another one of those journaling cards that was part of the pack, And then I used another one of these clear stickers on there, the sentiments, give the magic of the season. And then just for my strip across the back, I turned it into a fishtail with some patterned paper. And then just because it was kind of plain, I used some clear Nouveau crystal drops just to add some dimension in the corners here. And for some reason, I had a couple of these turquoise. I had cut them into circles, not sure why. So I used this sketch, Mojo Monday 281, to try and use up those circles, and decided it needed a pop of color. So I just used a stitched circle die to make a red mat for my Happy Birthday to You sentiment, and then pulled in the red again down here on the strip, added a pretty flower with a rhinestone in the middle, and then just to give the background a little more detail, I used my white gel pen to add some stitching. This is MFT WSC 265. Just used up some different rectangular scraps that I had. And again, I added some white gel pen stitching to the card base. And then because these two pieces were together and they were lighter, I wanted to bring in the green just to kind of help pull that down a little bit. And then I have my sentiment. And then I got into the little scraps. So once I got to this point, I just had a bunch of strips left. So I went through and I sorted all of my strips by width. And then I went through all of my card sketches to look for ones that had, you know, little squares, rectangles, or circles or whatever. And then I tried to sort my strips, not just by width, but that fit that sketch. And then went through and cut them all down and had them kind of piled with that sketch. That's just kind of how when I get to the end and there's little bitty scraps everywhere, it kind of helps me keep a little bit organized. So I was only able to get one that was these strips were 1 3/4 by 2 3/8, and this is S&S Sketch number 6. And it just so happened that they were kind of like the coordinating pattern, but different colors. So I just pulled them together with some burgundy cardstock and added my sentiment, and then felt like I needed a little bit more red. So I pulled the red through with some little cardstock circles. And the rectangles or squares kind of get smaller as we go through these sketches, because these are 1 3/4 by 2 inches, and this is Operation Right Home sketch number 25. And I was able to get a couple cards worth, like, I think I had at least eight of this pretty gray cream pattern. And so I decided to make this one a little more elegant, but kind of simple, kind of a simple elegance. And so it needed a little bit more pop of color in these blocks. So I just added some circles of the gray cardstock here in the middle, and then added a congratulations sentiment at the bottom. And this one, I kind of did the same thing, but with some hearts in the outer corners and made it happy anniversary. This one was all the same, and I just added happy birthday. And I feel like this one needs a little bit of something. I don't know if another fishtail up here in the gray or something, just to balance out that and to give it a little more interest. This one I just used 2 different patterns. This one was a combination of several. And this one I had 4 of the same again, and I used this diamond is a sticker that came from this pack of stickers again. And I just backed it on it's actually patterned paper that has like a little bit of weave pattern to it. And so I put it on that paper and then fussy cut it out around the diamond and added that to the center, and then actually centered my rectangle element on that one. And then this one, I was like 1 rectangle shy of being able to do a whole nother card. So I just pulled in some of my solid color paper scraps and went ahead and stamped my sentiment on there, and then added just a little bit of the burgundy on there just to give it a little more color and tie it in with that strip at the bottom. And smaller squares yet. These are 1.5 inches square, and it's Operation Right Home sketch number 154. You've probably seen this one. I use this one quite a bit when I'm making my cards out of these pads. So I just used, some of them are kind of varied patterns. And then the bottom, there's a strip across all of them. Sometimes they're embellished with another little thin pattern paper strip. Sometimes it's a circle element, depending on what I had that went with the patterns I used. And then these, I was excited to be able to finally use these. They are just these little holly sprigs that have some glitter. And there was, I'm not sure where they came from. I think I inherited these from my mother-in-law as well. But I'd been wanting to use them, but couldn't really find a great card that they would make a good element on as of yet. So I was excited to put them on here. I just made that my center element and then added my sentiment down here at the bottom instead of up here. So I have several that have that holly sprig. And then here's one where I was able to get all 4 of the gray chevron. So I made it happy birthday. And then I have 2 of these that were all the red and cream chevron. And then this little strip at the bottom, earlier on in the process before Christmas, I had made some bread wraps and cut them down to like 2.5 inches or whatever straight across, and then decided to cut out to follow the chevron line so that they had more of a chevron border instead of just a straight border. So I had a bunch of these like 1/2 inch at the point strips of the partial chevron. So I just added that with a little bit of gray, thin gray strip there, just to use those up. Again, no scrap left behind. And we get down to 1 1/4 inch squares using the Mojo Monday sketch number 238. So these are just kind of, they're all a mix of patterns. Some of them have the same pattern more than once, so I tried to kind of balance it out. And smaller yet, these are 1 1/8 inch wide, but then 1 1/4 inches long, and these little fishtails. So on this one, it's all different patterns, and then I added a little double fishtail banner down here with the Merry Christmas. And on this one, I had a whole bunch of this turquoise and cream stripe, so I just did it so that it was all the same except for this middle row going diagonal, and they are like more of that creamy and gray patterns. And then I just stamped Warm Holiday Wishes directly onto my gray card mat. And even smaller yet, these are all 1 inch squares. So I had a bunch of these turquoise and cream polka dot squares, and so I just went ahead and made one card with just them, like that quilting pattern going across the top. And then this strip, I don't know if you can see the lines very well. I don't know if I can get that to show up, but it has some lines like, you know, like ruled paper. And this came off the top of one of my journaling cards that I had cut off, and so I just stamped my sentiment on there because it kind of tied in with the color of the cream dots. And then these are just kind of like that quilted look where I just took a whole bunch of the squares and laid them across, kind of lined them up, and then glued them down. And something I've done in the past, which you could do to make it even look more like a quilted card front, is go in and add stitching detail to each square. But some of them have like a raised glitter element to it, and so I wasn't sure how the pen would go across there, so I just left them plain. And then we get into the little strips that I had left. So I used Operation Write Home sketch number 203. And these are actually thinner even than what the sketch called for, but it's kind of what I had left. So, and I left off the little banner or the little rectangle element down here because I didn't really have any other paper that was going to coordinate. And I wanted to do my sentiment up here on the big circle. So I just layered, you know, white circle on the green scalloped on a gray stitched, just to give it a little more interest. And then these were just the ones I made using the different size strips kind of grouped together. Just tied these all together with the Warm Holiday Wishes banner. This one kind of did the same thing but smaller version, and I ended up like triple matting it to help it stand out on the green background. And then Merry Wishes, I just cut that out with a little oval die and layered it. This is just kind of a different version. And then the same with this. Again, when I got to my strips, I tried to group them by width and then kind of found a common size that I could get to and kind of sorted them by that and then grouped them kind of by how they would go together on a card. So I got 105 cards out of this batch. So with the cards that I showed you before Christmas, that gives me a total of 157 cards, I think, from this pack, along with a bunch of other projects that I did. I will try to list all of the card sketches that I used down in the description box below. So let me know if there was any sketch that stood out to you, or if you had a favorite sketch or layout from all the cards I showed you today. And then I have one more project share video from this card, or from this paper pack, and I am using all the little scraps that are left from, all the paper scraps that are left from making the cards, and the rest of my pad cover here to make some Christmas tags. So next week I will be back with that project share and then a wrap-up video, and then I can finally kill off this pad and move on to something more current, like Valentine's Day. But I thank you guys for your time today. Please stay tuned for the rest of the projects from this pad. And thanks for hanging in with me over the last few months as I worked through this pad and some others through the busy holiday season and craft shows and all that fun stuff. But thanks for your time today, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Bye.